It was a cold, dreary afternoon, with the sky covered in a thick layer of gray clouds, casting a dull light over the city streets. The usual hum of traffic echoed down the road, the soft sound of tires crunching through the snow mixing with the distant rumble of passing cars. Inside his sleek, luxurious red sports car, a millionaire named Charles was making his way home after a long day at work. He was used to the comforts of his life: designer suits, fancy dinners, and the fast pace of business. But today, something felt different. As he drove through the snow-lined streets, Charles' eyes shifted from the road to the sidewalks, where he noticed something unusual. At first, he thought it was just another passerby trying to get out of the cold, but then he saw her clearly. A young woman, walking barefoot in the snow, carrying not one, not two, but 3 small children in her arms. The children were huddled close to their mother, their tiny bodies wrapped in brightly colored clothes, but even through their warmth, it was obvious that they were cold. The woman seemed exhausted, her face pale, and her steps were slow, almost as if she was struggling to carry the weight of her little ones. She had a determined look in her eyes, but it was clear that the harsh winter conditions were starting to take a toll on her. Charles slowed his car down, staring at the woman and her children. There was something about the scene that pulled at his heart. The sight of the mother, walking through the snow without shoes, carrying her children like they were the most precious thing in the world, moved him deeply. He could see the tenderness in her eyes as she gently held the babies close, shielding them from the harsh wind. She wasn't just trying to get home. She was fighting against the elements, ensuring that her children were safe. His mind raced as he watched her take one step after another, her face etched with exhaustion. The snow was now coming down harder, and Charles knew that if she didn't get shelter soon, she and her children would be in serious danger. He couldn't just drive by and ignore what he was seeing. He had everything: wealth, success, a luxurious lifestyle, but he felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. How could he have so much when others had so little? He glanced at the rearview mirror, checking the traffic behind him, then back at the woman. Without thinking, he made a snap decision that would change both of their lives forever. He pulled over to the side of the street, parked the car, and stepped out into the freezing cold. The wind bit at his face as he walked toward her, feeling his heart beat a little faster with each step. When the woman noticed him approaching, she paused for a moment. Her eyes flicked up at him, and for a split second, Charles could see the hesitation in her gaze. She looked at him like she was unsure whether he was a stranger who might be a threat or someone who could help. But Charles wasn't one to back down. He knew that this was a moment where he could make a difference, where he could step out of his comfortable world and offer someone the kind of help that truly mattered. "Excuse me," Charles said, his voice gentle but filled with urgency. "You and your children shouldn't be out here in this weather. Come with me, I can help you." The woman looked at him, clearly taken aback by his sudden appearance and offer. She glanced down at her children, and then back at Charles, her face filled with uncertainty. It was rare for people to show such kindness to strangers, especially in a world that often seemed to be filled with cold indifference. But something in his eyes told her that he wasn't lying. He wasn't asking for anything in return. He just wanted to help. I don't know," she stammered, her voice wavering as if she wasn't sure whether she could trust him. "I don't want to impose." Charles could sense her fear, the doubt that filled her heart. He smiled warmly, trying to put her at ease. "You're not imposing. I have a house nearby. It's warm, and your children will be safe there. Please, I insist." The woman hesitated for a moment longer, glancing at her children again, then back at Charles. He could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of taking a chance on someone who might not have her best interests at heart. But she was tired, and her children were suffering in the cold. Finally, with a soft sigh, she nodded. "Okay, I'll come with you." Charles smiled and gently guided her toward the car. As she climbed in, still holding her children, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. He wasn't sure what had drawn him to stop, whether it was his gut feeling or just the deep need to help, but he was glad he had made the decision. As he drove off into the snowy streets, he looked over at the woman. She was holding her children close, still unsure of what was to come. But for now, they were safe, and that was all that mattered. Little did they both know, this unexpected encounter would lead to something neither of them could have ever imagined. The car drove down the road, and for the first time in a long while, Charles felt something that he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. The snow continued to fall softly as Charles drove the woman and her children to his home. The streets were quiet, the world around them blanketed in white, almost as if time had slowed down. Inside the car, the atmosphere was filled with a mix of uncertainty and gratitude. The woman, whose name was Sarah, clutched her children tightly, glancing at Charles from time to time. Her face, though tired, seemed to soften a little with each passing mile. As the car moved through the quiet streets, Charles couldn't help but steal a glance at Sarah. She seemed so out of place in the lavish car, so far removed from the life he was used to. But there was something about her, a quiet strength, a deep resilience, that made him want to help her even more. Her children, huddled together in her arms, were calm now, perhaps reassured by the warmth inside the car. The youngest one, a small boy with big innocent eyes, rested his head against his mother's chest, his tiny hand clutching her sleeve. The car's engine hummed as Charles turned onto a road that led to his mansion. It was a massive home, surrounded by tall, iron gates, with stone pathways that led up to the front door. The mansion was everything Sarah had never imagined she would encounter in her lifetime. To her, it felt like a distant dream, something she couldn't even fathom. Yet here she was, in the back of a millionaire's car, heading toward a house that seemed to tower over everything she had ever known. Charles noticed her wide-eyed gaze as she looked out the window, taking in the massive estate. He could see the wonder in her eyes, but also the wariness. She wasn't used to this kind of life. For a moment, he wondered if she would feel out of place in such luxury, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. His home was a safe haven now, a place where she and her children could rest and recover from the harsh conditions they had faced. When they reached the front door, Charles parked the car and opened the door for Sarah. The wind outside was biting, and he could see the snowflakes swirling in the air. But inside, the warmth was immediate. The mansion, with its grand chandelier and elegant furnishings, felt like a different world, a stark contrast to the cold, desolate streets Sarah had just walked down. The soft hum of a fireplace in the distance added to the cozy atmosphere, making the house feel even more welcoming. Charles gestured for Sarah to enter first, smiling kindly. "You and your children are safe here," he said softly. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. I'll have something warm brought up for you." Sarah hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. She wasn't sure what to make of it all. This stranger, this lavish house, and the kindness he was showing her. She had spent so long struggling to get by that accepting help felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. But the look of sincerity on Charles' face made her feel like she could trust him. The warmth in the house embraced her as she stepped inside, and the first thing she noticed was the silence, a peace that seemed to wash over her after the chaos of the storm outside. As Sarah stood there, unsure of what to do next, Charles led her to the living room. The large windows allowed the soft glow of the fire to cast long shadows on the walls. A plush sofa was positioned near the fireplace, and Charles gently helped Sarah sit down with her children, who were starting to wake up from their nap. "Are you hungry?" Charles asked, breaking the silence. "I can have the kitchen prepare something for you, if you'd like." Sarah shook her head, her voice soft but grateful. "No, thank you. I'm just so overwhelmed." Charles nodded, understanding her feelings all too well. "I can imagine," he said. "It's not easy, but I want you to know you're safe here. No one's going to hurt you or your kids. You can stay here as long as you need." For a moment, there was silence between them, a heavy silence filled with unspoken thoughts. Sarah looked down at her children, who were now sitting on the sofa beside her, their little faces brightening as they began to adjust to the warmth of the room. The youngest, who had been quiet most of the journey, started giggling, a small sound of joy that filled the room. Sarah couldn't help but smile at her children's innocent happiness, a smile that was born from relief. The weight of her worries seemed to lighten just a little, but she still felt out of place in such luxury. She was used to roughing it, to doing whatever she could to get by. This kindness felt like a dream she didn't deserve. But Charles was persistent, offering her comfort without expecting anything in return. After a few minutes, a butler arrived with a tray of hot chocolate and blankets for the children. The warmth of the drink made Sarah feel a little more at ease. She wrapped her arms around her kids, still unsure of what to say. She didn't know how to express her gratitude for everything Charles had done for her. She had always been independent, always made do with what she had. But this was different. It was more than she could have ever imagined. Charles sat down across from them, watching them silently. His gaze was kind, and there was no judgment in his eyes. Just a simple understanding that she was going through something difficult, something he could never fully comprehend. But he had the means to help, and for the first time in a long while, he realized that helping others was the most meaningful thing he could do. "I know it's a lot to take in," Charles said softly, "but I'm glad you're here." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. She didn't know how to respond, but she was grateful. Deep down, she felt something stir, a feeling of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. She had never imagined this kind of kindness, but here it was, changing her life in ways she couldn't fully understand yet. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The days that followed were filled with warmth, not just from the crackling fireplace, but from the kindness and generosity that surrounded Sarah and her children. At Charles' mansion, they had found more than just shelter. They had found a place to heal. The children, once frightened and cold, now played freely in the expansive living room, their laughter echoing through the halls. Sarah, still overwhelmed, began to relax, the stress of her days on the streets slowly melting away with every passing hour. Charles, the millionaire who had so unexpectedly stepped into their lives, continued to offer his assistance without hesitation. He provided warm meals, clothes, and even toys for the children, ensuring they had everything they needed. Every day, he checked in on Sarah and the kids, offering kind words and a listening ear whenever they needed it. Sarah, though still cautious, had begun to feel a sense of safety that she hadn't known in a long time. But despite the comfort they had found in Charles' home, a part of Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. She couldn't help but feel like she was taking advantage of his generosity, unsure of why he was being so kind to her and her children. It felt too good to be true, and she kept wondering what his motives were. Was he just being nice, or was there something more to this act of kindness? She had never been one to trust easily, especially with her children, and the nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach wouldn't go away. One evening, as Sarah and the children were settling down for dinner, Charles approached her with an unexpected proposal. They were sitting at a grand dining table, a delicious spread of food in front of them. The children were happily munching on their meal, their faces glowing with the warmth of the house. But Sarah couldn't shake the unease she was feeling. As Charles sat down across from her, his face serious yet kind, she braced herself for what was coming. "I've been thinking," Charles began, his voice calm and steady. "You and your children have been here for a few days now, and I'm glad you're safe. But I can't help but feel that there's something more I could do to help." Sarah looked up at him, her heart racing. She hadn't expected this. Was he about to ask for something in return? Was his kindness only a way to get something from her? The thoughts swirled in her mind, and for a moment, she struggled to keep her composure. Charles continued, sensing her hesitation. "I know this might sound strange, but I've been thinking about the future, about what's next for you and your children. I want to offer you something that might help you start over, something that could change everything for you." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Unwilling to help you get back on your feet," Charles said, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm offering you a job, here at my estate. It's not much, but it will give you a place to stay and a way to support your family. You can take care of the children, work with the household staff, and slowly rebuild your life. I'll make sure you have everything you need, and I'll support you every step of the way." Sarah was stunned. The offer sounded almost too good to be true, but it wasn't just the job that left her speechless. It was the underlying message behind it. Charles was offering her a chance to build a new life, to escape the cycle of hardship that had kept her in survival mode for so long. It was a golden opportunity, one that could give her the stability she had dreamed of for her children. But there was a catch. A part of Sarah couldn't accept it. It felt like too much too soon. The reality of the situation began to settle in, and Sarah's mind raced. She had never depended on anyone for help before. She had always worked hard to get by, to make ends meet, no matter how difficult the circumstances. The idea of relying on someone else, even someone as kind as Charles, was a foreign concept to her. What if it didn't work out? What if she failed? What if she became indebted to him in a way that she couldn't escape? Her thoughts were interrupted when Charles, sensing her hesitation, gently placed a hand on the table. "I know this is a big decision," he said softly, "but I want you to know that this offer is genuine. There are no strings attached, no hidden motives. I simply want to help you. You and your children deserve a fresh start, and I want to be a part of that." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at him, trying to read his expression. There was sincerity in his eyes, a quiet determination to help her in whatever way he could. And yet, the nagging feeling in her gut refused to go away. Could she really trust him? Could she accept this life-changing offer without fearing that it would come with an expectation she wasn't ready for? As the silence hung in the air, Charles gave her a reassuring smile. "Take your time to think about it," he said gently. "There's no rush. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. I just want you to know that the option is there, whenever you're ready." Sarah sat back in her chair, her mind swirling with questions and emotions. She had come here looking for shelter, but now it seemed like she was facing an entirely different decision, a choice that could change the course of her life forever. Would she accept the opportunity and trust Charles, or would she continue to fight on her own, unsure of where her next step would lead? In that moment, Sarah realized that this was not just about a job or a roof over her head. This was about trust, about taking a leap of faith into a new life, and about giving her children a future they could be proud of. The twist was clear. This wasn't just an offer of kindness. It was an invitation to rebuild, to start anew. But would she be brave enough to take it? The next few days passed in a blur for Sarah. The mansion, once a place of uncertainty and unfamiliarity, now felt like a home. Charles had given her the time she needed to think, but the decision weighed heavily on her heart. She spent her nights staring out of the grand windows, looking at the snow falling gently outside, lost in thought. Her children, now accustomed to the warmth and safety of their new surroundings, played in the rooms with laughter that echoed through the halls. They were beginning to feel like they belonged here, and that alone brought Sarah a sense of peace. But the question that had been haunting her for days remained unanswered. Should she accept Charles' offer and trust in the new life he was offering, or should she go back to the life she knew? A life of struggle and uncertainty, but one that she could control. It was a difficult choice, one that tugged at her heart. One evening, as she sat on the edge of the fireplace, gently rocking her youngest child to sleep, Charles entered the room. His presence was calming, and he had a way of making everything seem less daunting. He didn't rush her. He didn't push her to make a decision before she was ready. He simply sat down beside her, his gaze soft and patient. "I've been thinking," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence, "about what you offered me." Charles smiled, nodding. "And? I don't know what I was expecting when I came here," she continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion. But I never thought I would find this kind of kindness, this sense of safety. I'd spent so many years just trying to survive, never allowing myself to dream of a better life. I thought I could never have something like this." Charles listened intently, sensing the vulnerability in her words. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to keep fighting on your own. Sometimes the bravest thing is to accept help, to allow yourself to receive kindness when it's offered." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes searching for something in his. "But what if I'm not strong enough to live up to this? What if I fail? What if I can't give my children the life they deserve?" Charles shook his head. "You've already shown incredible strength. You've taken care of them through more than most could imagine. This is your chance to give them something better, a life that's filled with opportunities. And you don't have to do it alone." The weight of her fears and doubts began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of hope. It wasn't just about the mansion or the luxury. It was about the possibility of something more, something she had never allowed herself to believe in. Sarah had spent so long living in survival mode, always afraid to trust, always afraid of being let down. But here, with Charles, she saw a future where her children could thrive, where she could rebuild her life, not out of desperation, but out of the promise of a better tomorrow. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah slowly allowed herself to step into this new chapter. She accepted Charles' offer, not out of obligation, but out of the realization that it was an opportunity for herself and her children to live a life they had never imagined. She began to work with the household staff, helping with light duties around the estate, and slowly learning the ways of the mansion. The work wasn't easy, but it gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling of self-worth she hadn't experienced in years. And as she worked alongside the staff, Sarah began to see the depth of Charles' generosity. He didn't just offer her a job. He offered her respect, dignity, and a chance to grow. Every day, she saw the way he treated the people around him, with kindness, fairness, and an understanding that everyone, no matter their background, deserved the chance to succeed. One afternoon, while walking through the estate with her children, Sarah stopped to look out over the vast grounds. The sight before her was nothing short of breathtaking. The rolling hills, the flowers beginning to bloom, the bright blue sky stretching endlessly above. It was a peacefulness she had never known, and as she stood there, watching her children run freely in the garden, a deep sense of gratitude filled her heart. "This is what you wanted for us, wasn't it?" Sarah whispered to herself, as if the wind itself had carried her thoughts. Her children ran toward her, their laughter ringing in the air. She crouched down to greet them, feeling a wave of warmth spread through her chest. She realized in that moment that she had made the right choice. She had chosen hope. She had chosen to trust, to let go of the fear that had held her back for so long. And in return, she had found not only safety, but a place where her children could dream, where they could build their futures in a way she had never dreamed possible. Charles had given them more than just a place to stay. He had given them a chance to live, to thrive, to be more than survivors. In his kindness, he had shown them that the future wasn't defined by where they came from, but by where they chose to go. And as Sarah stood there, with her children's hands in hers, she knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would build a new life, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. It wasn't just a resolution, it was a new beginning. The mansion, the warmth, the safety, it was all real now. But more importantly, it was a symbol of something far greater, a future full of promise, shaped by a single, selfless act of kindness that had changed everything.